So I'm sitting here in my garden. It's a very cloudy but very humid day. But I wanted to share with you a video I watched last week, which I thought was really thought-provoking. It was by Mike Helton, Survival and Prepping, and I believe it was entitled SHTF. How big of a garden would you grow in SHTF? And I'll put a link to that video. So it made me think, how would I change my garden if it was really an SHTF situation? You know, would I grow the same things I'm growing now? Would I change it? So this is kind of what I came up with. I thought there was multiple considerations. One, you need to always have heirloom varieties, and I don't always grow heirloom varieties. I like some of the hybrids. They're more disease resistant and sometimes have a better production rate. But I do always keep heirloom seeds on hand just in case. Now, one of the other considerations would be how calorie dense is the vegetable? Because if it doesn't have many calories, is it really something that you want to waste your precious garden space on? Another consideration is how many days to harvest. You know, how long does it take up that precious garden space? Could, in those same days to harvest, you grow 2 different vegetables to feed your family? And after you grow it, can you easily collect the seeds or bulbs or whatever you need to do to make sure you can plant your garden the next year in a prolonged SHTF situation? And then, how long with what you harvest, how long can you store it? How long will it last in storage? And then, of course, a very important consideration is how easily can I grow it in my garden zone? Is it relatively pest-free? Another consideration, especially depending on where you live, might be how drought-resistant are the vegetable plants. Here we generally get a lot of rain, but that could change, so this could be an important consideration. And lastly, does your garden need to produce food for your family and for any livestock? Now, many of the things you grow in your garden aren't very calorie intensive. I mean, think of lettuce. Not many calories there. But you might have to more consider calories in an SHTF situation. So one of the things you can grow are sunflowers. Believe it or not, sunflower seeds have 745 calories per cup. And to me, one of the advantages is the sunflower is what I call a gray man plant. You know, your neighbors might think you're growing sunflowers for the flowers and not realize that you are actually growing them for the sunflower seeds as an important calorie-intensive food supplement for you and for your chickens or rabbits, if you're keeping those. Now, as far as vegetables are concerned, beans are one of the most calorie-intensive, and I don't think that's any surprise to us. I mean, that's one of the reasons many of us have dried beans in our long-term food storage. And pinto beans have 286 calories per cup. And of course, you can easily dry the individual beans and you can use them all winter long, or you can use them to plant next year's garden. So next on the calorie-intensive vegetable list would be corn. It has 132 calories per cup. And of course, it can be easily dehydrated, and then you can rehydrate it and use it all winter long. And of course, those dried kernels can also be used to plant next year's garden. You may wish to consider growing dent corn instead of your normal sweet corn. And dent corn is like field corn because it can be dried and then ground into flour to be used to make tortillas or other things. And also, dent corn is great for feeding your livestock. Now, cooked pumpkin has 113 calories per cup. It's relatively easy to grow, but it can take up a big garden space, so that is a consideration. And pumpkins keep very well in storage. They can keep up to 6 months. And pumpkins are also great for feeding your chickens. And of course, you can also eat the pumpkin seeds, or you can gather them up, dry them, and plant those seeds to harvest pumpkins in your next year's garden. Next on the list, potatoes. Be it sweet potatoes or regular potatoes, they have about the same as pumpkin, about 113 calories per cup. And here in the north, I've grown sweet potatoes, but that takes a little bit more effort. I really don't have any problem growing Yukon Gold potatoes, which is one of my family's favorite. And they've really been pest-free. They're very easy to store also. They have long storage time. Now, the thing with potatoes is, if your family is really hungry in an SHTF situation, you've actually got to save some of the potatoes, right? And cut up the eyes to be able to grow potatoes the next season. Now, parsnips have almost the same calories per cup. They're pretty easy to grow, although I find potatoes are much easier to grow here. And for parsnips, I'm doing an experiment this year. I let last year's parsnips that were still in the ground come up, and I'm going to try harvesting the seeds. And again, they can keep in the ground very well, and you can harvest them even when there's snow on the ground if you give some protection. Here are some of my parsnips. I'm letting them go to seed, and we'll see if I can collect it and grow parsnips from the sheer seed. Now, another thing I'm trying this year is I'm growing Jersulem artichokes, or as they now label them to be more, I guess, consumer friendly, sunchokes. They have 92 calories per cup, and I loved them as a child. My aunt used to grow them. They don't have a long storage space if you take them out of the ground. However, they store pretty well in the ground, and you can even harvest them after some frost. Another neat thing about them is that they produce a sunflower-like flower. So again, it's another gray men plant. Your neighbors could think you're just growing it for the flowers and not realize it also is an important food source. Now, my understanding is the Native Americans use this as an important food source also. The other neat thing about it, you don't have to worry about harvesting seeds or bulbs or whatever. It's an incredibly invasive plant, and it's very hard to get rid of. So you always would have plenty of Jersulem artichokes to harvest. And again, for me, it's been relatively pest-free. Now, I have always grown Rutabagas, which is about 50 calories per cup, and turnips, which is about 36 calories per cup, and beets, which is higher, about 74 calories per cup. However, I have never tried harvesting the seeds, so I'm not sure how hard that is. Beets don't store as well as rutabagas and turnips. Rutabagas can store up to 4 to 6 months properly in storage, and the same for turnips. So they are a great food source, and of course, your livestock also would appreciate the rutabagas or the turnips. And all of them, their tops can be used for greens, so you don't have to grow Swiss chard or kale or something else to produce greens for your family. Now, even though I said I wouldn't grow lettuce, I would grow radishes, and they only have 18 calories per cup. But the wonderful thing about radishes is they're only 22 days to harvest. So you can plant a bunch, and you can plant them around your tomato plants or other areas, and very easy to get seeds from them. In fact, the seed pods are edible. I have a video on that if you're interested. So here are some of the radish pods I'm growing this summer. As you can see, you just let the radish go to seed and the pods occur. Very easy to harvest. Now, tomatoes take up quite a bit of garden space. They're only 32 calories per cup, and they can be prone to pests and diseases. However, I would definitely try to include them in my SHTF garden. They are easily dehydrated, and you can then use the dehydrated tomatoes all winter long to supplement your preps. And they're so versatile in so many recipes. So even though they're not calorie intensive and they take up a lot of garden space, I would definitely try to grow tomatoes, and probably more tomatoes than I grow now. Now, you know, I also grow blueberries, I have raspberries, I have rhubarb, which is a great perennial plant. You really don't have to do much with it, and it comes back every year. And I also have a plum tree, a couple pears, a couple apples, a cherry, and 2 walnuts. My walnuts haven't produced yet, nor my pears, but I expect either next year or the year after to have them start producing. So those are also great supplements. And I have a 40-foot asparagus patch, which again doesn't really take that much maintenance, and I would definitely keep that. Asparagus does not store well, so it would have to be something that we gorge on in spring. Now for me, something that's essential for cooking are onions and garlic. And I usually do onion starts every year, so I've never tried to grow onions for seeds, but I know it's a pretty long seed to harvest process. So I also have something called potato onions. And I have a video on that if you're interested, but these are great. You just replant the little bulbs, kind of like you do garlic every fall, and you have a new crop every year. So they're kind of self-generating. And of course I've included garlic in my garden. And again, I can harvest in summer and then replant some of the cloves in the fall, and I have a crop the next year. And both of those make food taste so much better. So here's some of my broccoli going to seed, and you will notice that I did not include broccoli or cabbages or Brussels sprouts in something I would grow in SHTF. And the reason for me is because where I live, this is very pest intensive. You know, those little white moths that leave the cabbage worms. In an SHTF situation, I think it'd be very difficult to keep it under control. So I would not grow these. Now, I try to keep 3 months chicken feed on hand, along with some cracked corn. But it would depend on when an SHTF situation would happen and how long it would last, whether that would be ample enough. If it's during the summer, you know, I could let my chickens free range. I used to do that, and there was a fox massacre and we lost our whole flock. So I no longer do that, but I would if it was an SHTF situation. But I would also need to grow things that I could supplement feed with in the winter when there is no grass or worms for them. So I would be looking at the dent corn, the sunflower seeds, and pumpkins in order to do that. Now, I always map my garden each year using Excel template. Again, I got a video if you're interested. And I would keep the asparagus bed just as it is, as I said, but my strawberry bed would change into a Yukon Gold potato bed. And I would probably dig up more ground for potatoes. I would also dig up a lot of lawn for corn, because I really think that is important for long-term storage. And if you notice, my garden is fenced in. And that's because we have a lot of deer in the area. So that corn could also be used to bait deer and get some extra protein in your diet if need be. Now, I wish I had a root cellar in order to store vegetables better in the winter. I do not have one, but maybe someday. Now, Mike's video also talked about should you have more of a clandestine garden, because will your neighbors see your garden, and if times get tough, want to raid your garden, you know, you end up being a target. So should you have something more hidden? Now, I had commented that I thought maybe it would be better to get together with your neighbors and have a large community garden or community gardens where you all toil in the effort, but you also all provide security for that garden. Just an idea. But probably the best in that type of situation would be if you could grow your food in your house. So there's a channel I watch, I think it's called Hidden Harvest, I'll put a link here, but he is doing just that in his basement. And of course, to do this in SHTF situation, you would need to have solar power for those growing lights, but definitely a consideration. So Mike's video definitely made me think, and I would like to hear from you what you would change in your SHTF garden. Please comment below. As always, please subscribe and share the knowledge, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.